I am Julian Pierce. I am 65 years old, and if life has taught me one brutal lesson, it is that loyalty is the most expensive currency in the world, and most people are counterfeiting it. I spent 40 years building a logistics empire worth $500 million, bleeding into the concrete of every warehouse foundation, missing birthdays, skipping vacations, and trading my sleep for market share. I gave my family everything: the mansions, the Ivy League degrees, the black cards with no limits. In return, exactly 7 days after I buried my wife, they handed me a retirement package that was essentially an eviction notice. They looked at me across the mahogany table and saw a grieving widower, a relic, a man too broken to fight back. They thought they were putting a sick dog out of its misery, but they made a fatal miscalculation. They didn't know that the relic sitting in front of them wasn't just the CEO. I was the architect of the entire game they were trying to play. They didn't know I held the only key to the vault that actually mattered. They thought they had won the war before the first shot was fired. By tomorrow morning, they will be destitute. Their reputations will be ash, and I will be the one standing over the wreckage of their arrogance. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The air in the boardroom was recycled and stale, chilled to a temperature that kept everyone alert and uncomfortable. It was a climate I had designed myself decades ago to keep meetings short, but today, the cold felt personal. I sat at the head of the table, the leather of my chair creaking slightly as I shifted my weight. My wife, Catherine, had been in the ground for exactly 1 week. The dirt on her grave hadn't even settled yet, and the vultures were already circling the carcass of my life. To my right sat Reed, my son. He was 40 years old, but in that moment, he looked like a teenager waiting for a scolding. He was fidgeting with his cufflinks, avoiding my eyes, his gaze fixed on the polished grain of the table. He was the Chief Operating Officer of Pierce Logistics, a title I had given him not because he earned it, but because Catherine wanted to keep the family close. Across from him sat his wife, Beatrix. If Reed was the nervous prey, Beatrix was the apex predator. She was impeccable. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe architectural bun that pulled her skin tight against her skull. Her suit was a sharp navy Armani that cost more than my first truck. She didn't fidget. She didn't look away. She stared right at me with eyes that were as flat and blue as a frozen lake. "Let's be realistic, Julian," Beatrix said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. It was the voice of someone who had rehearsed this conversation in the mirror 100 times. The market doesn't pause for mourning. We all loved Catherine. She was the soul of this company. But without her, stability is the priority. I didn't blink. I kept my hands folded on the table, my face a mask of stone. "Stability," I repeated. The word tasted like ash. "Is that what we're calling it?" "We're calling it leadership," Beatrix corrected, a shark-like smile touching the corners of her red lips. "Investors are nervous. They see a CEO who has been absent, distracted. You missed the Q3 earnings call. You haven't signed the fleet expansion orders for the Midwest hub. People are whispering, Julian. They're saying you've lost your edge. They're saying the grief has made you soft." I was holding my wife's hand while she died, I said, my voice low and gravelly. I didn't think the fleet expansion was the priority at that specific moment. Reed flinched. He actually looked pained, a flicker of guilt crossing his weak features. "Dad, we want to protect the legacy. Mom would have wanted—" "Don't," I cut him off. the single syllable cracking like a whip in the silent room. Do not finish that sentence, Reed. You don't get to speak for her. Beatrix placed a hand on Reed's forearm, silencing him. It was a gesture of dominance, not comfort. She turned her gaze back to me, her eyes narrowing. The board meets in 5 days, Julian. We have the votes. We have the support. We're offering you a graceful exit. Chairman Emeritus, a generous stipend. You can travel. You can finally rest. You're 65. You're a relic in a digital world. Step down, let Reed take the helm, and preserve your dignity. She slid a thick document across the table. It was bound in heavy linen paper. The separation agreement. And if I refuse? I asked, ignoring the document. Beatrix's smile widened, revealing perfect white veneers. Then we bring the vote to the floor. We air the dirty laundry. The missed meetings, the erratic behavior during Catherine's illness, the stalled contracts. We will paint a picture of a senile old man driving the company off a cliff. We will humiliate you, Julian, and we will win. I looked at her. I looked at the ambition radiating off her like heat waves from asphalt. She wanted this so badly she could taste it. She saw Pierce Logistics not as a business that moved food and medicine to millions of people, but as a personal ATM to fund her lifestyle. And she saw me as the only obstacle standing in her way. I looked at Reed. And you? I asked softly. Is this what you want? To put your father out to pasture? Reed swallowed hard. It's business, Dad. It's time for a new generation. Business, I echoed. I stood up slowly. I could feel the stiffness in my joints, the weight of the last few months pressing down on my shoulders. But I didn't let them see it. I straightened my spine, buttoned my jacket, and looked down at them. I'll review the proposal, I said. Beatrix's eyes flashed with triumph. She thought I had folded. She thought the old lion had no teeth left. Take 24 hours, she said magnanimously. Don't take too long, Julian. The future is waiting. I turned and walked out of the boardroom without looking back. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, sealing them in their bubble of premature victory. They were celebrating. I was already loading the artillery. I walked through the corridors of the building I had built from the ground up. I passed the framed photographs on the walls, black and white images of my first truck, a battered Ford that smelled of diesel and sweat. I passed the photos of the groundbreakings, the ribbon cuttings, the massive distribution centers that now dotted the map from Seattle to Miami. Employees nodded as I passed, but I could see the looks in their eyes. Pity. Uncertainty. The whispers Beatrix mentioned weren't imaginary. She had planted them, watered them, and let them bloom. They looked at me and saw a ghost. I entered my office, a corner suite with a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. I didn't sit at my desk. I didn't pour a drink. I went straight to the window and looked out at the gray city below. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from Kato Imai, my personal attorney, and the only man in this building I trusted with my life. Message. They've locked out your admin access to the financial server. It just happened. I stared at the screen. Beatrix wasn't waiting for my answer. She was already tightening the noose, cutting off my information flow, blinding me before the kill. She was thorough. I had to give her that. I typed a reply. Me. Meet me at the drop. 1 hour. Bring the extraction kit. I deleted the message immediately. I couldn't trust the company network. I couldn't trust the Wi-Fi. I couldn't trust the walls. Catherine had warned me about this. 6 months ago, sitting on the patio, wrapped in a blanket, she had looked at me with those sharp, knowing eyes. "She's hungry, Julian," she had said, her voice rasping from the treatment. "Beatrix, she looks at this company and she doesn't see the work. She sees the power. And Reed, he's too weak to stop her." I had dismissed it then. I told her she was being paranoid, that the chemo was making her cynical. I had defended them. God, I had defended them. The regret hit me like a physical blow to the gut, sharp and nauseating. I had been blind. I had been a fool. But I wouldn't be a victim. I grabbed my coat. I didn't take my briefcase. I didn't take my laptop. I walked out of the office with nothing but the clothes on my back and the rage burning in my chest. The drop was what Kaito and I called a small, grease-stained diner on the south side, near the old freight yards where I used to load trucks myself. It was the kind of place where the coffee tasted like battery acid, and the waitress had been smoking since the Nixon administration. It was perfect. No corporate spies, no electronic bugs, just truckers and silence. Kaito was already there, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the wall. He was a sharp contrast to the peeling vinyl seats. A Japanese-American man in his late 50s, dressed in a suit that cost more than the building we were sitting in. He had a laptop open, but it was disconnected from the internet. I slid into the booth opposite him. "They made the move," I said without preamble. Kaito nodded, not looking up from the screen. "I assumed as much when the IT department flagged a priority credential revocation for your account ID. Beatrix?" "And Reed," I said. He sat there and let her hold the knife. Kaito stopped typing. He looked at me, his dark eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful understanding. He had known Catherine almost as long as I had. He knew what this meant. "I'm sorry, Julian," he said softly. "Save the sympathy," I snapped, though I took the coffee he pushed toward me. "I need to know what they're hiding. You don't stage a coup this aggressive just because you're ambitious. You do it because you're covering your tracks. Beatrix is rushing this. She's frantic. Why? Panic," Kaito said. "Panic induces speed. Speed induces errors." "Exactly. She wants me out before the quarterly audit next month. She wants total control so she can bury something." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I want a forensic audit, Kaito. Deep dive. I want you to tear apart the financials for the last 24 months. Every vendor, every contract, every expense report under $10,000. "Under 10,000? Kaito raised an eyebrow. "It's the limit for Reed's discretionary approval," I said. "If they're stealing, they're doing it in bite-sized chunks so it doesn't trigger the board's radar. Start with consulting firms. Marketing agencies. Anything intangible." Kaito nodded, making a note on a yellow legal pad. "I can do that, but if they've locked you out, getting the raw data will be difficult." "I have a back door," I said, "but we have to be fast. And Kaito, there's something else." "What?" "Catherine," I said. The name hung in the air between us. Before she died, she was acting strange. She was making calls. She was moving boxes from the attic. She told me she was organizing old photos, but she was up at all hours. I think she knew something. I think she was investigating them." Kaito frowned. "She never mentioned anything to me." "She wouldn't," I said. "She would have wanted to protect me. She knew I was falling apart watching her die. She wouldn't have burdened me with a corporate war." I took a sip of the bitter coffee. "Find the money, Kaito. Find out why they're so desperate to get rid of me. And do it before the board meeting on Friday." And if I find what we think we'll find? Kaito asked. Then we don't just fire them, I said, my voice cold. We destroy them. 2 days later, I was pacing the floor of Kaito's private office. The sun had gone down hours ago, turning the windows into black mirrors reflecting my own exhausted face. Got it, Kaito said. I stopped pacing and moved to his desk. Show me. Kaito spun his monitor around. A spreadsheet was open, a complex web of red lines and numbers. It took some digging, Kaito said, tapping the screen. They were clever, but not clever enough. They used a technique called smurfing, breaking large transactions into small, undetectable amounts. But the destination is always the same. He pointed to a recurring vendor name. B&R Strategics. B&R, I read aloud. Beatrix and Reed. Jesus, they didn't even try to be creative. Registered in Delaware as a limited liability corporation, Kaito explained. Stated purpose: logistical efficiency consulting. They've been billing Pierce Logistics for 18 months. Market analysis. Workflow optimization. Synergy reports. Vaporware. No reports were ever filed. No work was ever done. How much? I asked, bracing myself. Total billed to date, $812,450, Kaito said. Over $800,000. While I was working 18-hour days to keep the stock price up during a recession, while Catherine was going through rounds of radiation that burned her skin, they were siphoning nearly $1 million out of the company to fund. What? Where did the money go? I demanded. Kaito clicked a few keys. A new window popped up. Bank statements for B&R Strategics. Direct wire transfers, Kaito said. 2 main outflows. 1. A down payment on a property in Aspen, Colorado. A ski chalet. 5 bedrooms, ski in, ski out. Title is in Beatrix's maiden name. And the rest? A lump sum payment to a dealership in Chicago. A 2024 Porsche 911 Turbo S custom order. Matte black. I felt a surge of bile in my throat. A ski house. A sports car. They weren't stealing to pay off debts or save a sick child. They were stealing for toys. They were looting my life's work to play dress-up. Print it, I said. Print everything. Wait, Kaito said, his voice suddenly tense. Julian, look at this. He was staring at the screen, his brow furrowed. He was looking at the authorization logs for the B&R payments. What is it? The approval signatures, Kaito said slowly. They aren't Reed's. I froze. What do you mean? You said it was his discretionary limit. It is, Kaito said. But the digital signature on the invoices, it's yours. The room went silent. The hum of the computer server in the corner seemed to roar in my ears. Mine? I stepped closer, squinting at the screen. That's impossible. I never signed these. I never even saw these invoices. I know that, Kaito said, his fingers flying across the keyboard now. But the system thinks you did. Look at the metadata. The user ID is J. Pierce, CEO. The authentication key matches your biometric token. I stared at the screen, a cold dread washing over the anger. They framed me. It's worse than a frame-up, Kaito said, his face pale. If we take this to the board, if we show them the theft, the evidence points directly to you. Beatrix can claim she and Reed knew nothing about B&R Strategics. She can claim you set up the shell company to embezzle funds for your retirement. She can claim that's why they wanted you to step down quietly, to protect you from prison. I staggered back, hitting the wall. It was a masterstroke. It was evil, pure and simple. Beatrix hadn't just stolen the money. She had used the theft to build a trap door under my feet. If I fought her, she would reveal the embezzlement and send me to federal prison. If I resigned, she would keep the money and the company. She has me in a checkmate, I whispered. Not yet, Kaito said, his eyes hard. Digital signatures can be spoofed, but we need to prove it. We need to find the origin of the approval command. If we can prove the command didn't come from your laptop, but from somewhere else, we can turn it back on them. How? We need the IP logs, Kaito said. We need to see exactly where the signal originated. But those logs are on the internal security server at the office, the one you're locked out of. I can't get in, I said. My badge is deactivated. We don't need to get in physically, Kaito said. We need a hacker. We didn't go to a criminal. We went to a specialist Kaito knew, a cybersecurity consultant named Felix, who worked out of a basement in Wicker Park that smelled of ozone and stale pizza. Felix didn't ask questions. He just took the hard drive image Kaito had managed to scrape before the lockout and started working. 3 hours passed. I paced the small room like a caged animal. Every minute that ticked by was a minute closer to the board meeting. Got it, Felix mumbled, his mouth full of pretzels. Show me, I demanded. Okay, so here's the transaction from last month, Felix said, pointing to a line of code. User J. Pierce, CEO, approves payment. But look at the packet header. The latency is wrong. In English, Felix, I snapped. The signal, Felix said. It didn't come from the CEO's laptop. It came from a device utilizing a VPN to mimic the CEO's IP address. But the VPN dropped for 0.4 seconds during the handshake. And during that drop, the real MAC address of the device was exposed. Felix grinned. It's an iPad Pro, device name one on Queen Bee. Beatrix, I exhaled. She used her own iPad, Kaito said, shaking his head in disbelief. Arrogance. She thought no one would ever look this deep. So we have her, I said. Almost, Felix said. This is just a trace on a copied hard drive. It's circumstantial. To stand up in court, or a hostile board meeting, you need the raw server logs, the immutable chain of custody. You need the file syslog auth 2020 dat directly from the mainframe. Where is it? I asked. On the secure server in the IT wing, Felix said. You have to download it directly. And you have to do it before she realizes we're looking for it and purges the system. We have the proof, I said to Kaito. But we need the weapon. There's one more thing, Kaito said. Before we go back to the office, you need to see Matilda. The nurse? I asked. Why? Because, Kaito said, closing his laptop. While you were looking for the money, I was looking into Catherine's phone records. The night before she died, she called Matilda 3 times, and she called the bank. Matilda Solis lived in a small brick bungalow in Pilsen. Her garden was immaculate, filled with the roses Catherine had taught her how to prune. When she opened the door and saw me, her face crumpled. Mr. Pierce, she whispered. I was waiting for you. You were? She told me you would come, Matilda said. She said, when the wolves come for him, he will come to you. She led me into her kitchen. It was warm and smelled of cinnamon. She went to a ceramic jar on the counter and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Catherine was not just sick, Mr. Pierce, Matilda said, her hands trembling as she held the pouch. She was awake. In those last weeks, when you thought she was sleeping, she was watching. She saw Mrs. Beatrix looking at the financial papers. She heard Mr. Reed talking on the phone about timelines and liquidations. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, my voice cracking. She tried, Matilda said. But you were so sad. She didn't want your last memories of her to be about war. She wanted to solve it herself. So she did. Matilda opened the pouch. Inside was a single heavy iron key. It looked old, tarnished. What is this? I asked, taking it. The metal was cold in my palm. It is for a safety deposit box, Matilda said. Box 404 at the First National Trust. She opened it 40 years ago. She said the truth is inside. She said this is your shield. I stared at the key. Catherine had been playing a game of 4D chess while dying of cancer. She had prepared a failsafe. Thank you, Matilda, I said. Go, she said, wiping her eyes. Finish it for her. The First National Trust was a fortress of limestone and marble downtown. The air inside was hushed, reverent. I showed my ID and the key. The bank manager, a man who looked like he had been embalmed in the 1950s, nodded solemnly. Mrs. Pierce left strict instructions, he said. Access was to be granted only to you, and only after her death. He led me into the vault. The door was a massive circle of steel that hissed as it swung open. The walls were lined with thousands of metal drawers. Box 404. I inserted the iron key. The manager inserted his master key. Click. I pulled the long metal drawer out. It was heavy. I carried it to a private viewing room and set it on the table. My hands were shaking. What had Catherine hidden for 4 decades? I opened the lid. There was no money inside. No gold. Just a stack of yellowed documents and a small, leather-bound diary. I picked up the first document. It was a birth certificate, dated August 14th, 1984. Name, Reed Michael Pierce. Mother, Sarah Jenkins. Father, Julian Pierce. The world stopped spinning. The air left the room. Sarah Jenkins. A waitress I had known for a brief, stupid month during a separation from Catherine early in our marriage. A mistake. A drunken, reckless mistake. I had paid her off. She had disappeared. I thought she had terminated the pregnancy. I looked at the next document. Adoption papers. Dated 6 months later. Signed by Catherine Pierce. I grabbed the diary. I flipped to the entry date. August 20th, 1984. I found him today. The baby. He has Julian's eyes. The mother doesn't want him. She wants cash. Julian thinks the problem is gone, but there is a child. A son. If I leave him there, he will have a terrible life. If I tell Julian, the guilt will destroy him. He will never forgive himself. So I will do the only thing I can. I will bring him home. I will tell Julian I adopted a child from the agency. I will raise my husband's son as my own, and I will never let him know the sin that created him. I will turn this betrayal into a family. I sank into the chair, tears streaming down my face. I gasped for air, sobbing. She knew, she had always known. For 40 years, she had raised the product of my infidelity. She had loved him, nursed him, championed him. She had protected me from my own shame. And Reed was my biological son, but not hers. I turned the page. A bookmark fell out. A folded legal document. The last will and testament of Catherine Pierce, amended. I scanned the legal jargon until I hit the paragraph highlighted in yellow marker. Section 14. The Bloodline Protection Clause. In the event of my death, my 51% controlling interest in Pierce Logistics shall pass exclusively to a biological heir of my body. No adopted lineage, regardless of legal standing, shall inherit the controlling share. This trust is absolute. I stared at the words. Catherine knew. She knew Beatrix was a predator. She knew Reed was weak. so she had built a wall. Reed, as an adopted son, legally, was excluded from the controlling stake if this clause was invoked. But if Reed couldn't inherit, and I was only holding 49%, who got the 51%? I flipped to the last page of the diary. I have a daughter. A daughter I gave up when I was 16, before I met Julian. I found her last year. She is a surgeon in Philadelphia. Her name is Audrey Winslow. She is good. She is strong. If Julian reads this, it means the wolves are at the door. Find Audrey. She is the heir. She is the future. My God, the scope of it was staggering. Catherine had a secret daughter. Reed was my secret son, and the company belonged to the stranger in Philadelphia. I closed the box. The tears dried on my face, leaving behind a tight, hard mask of resolve. I had the weapon. I had the shield. Now I just needed to survive the next 12 hours. I grabbed my phone to call Kaito. I have it, I said. I have everything. Julian, Kaito's voice was panicked. Get to the office, now. Why? Felix is monitoring the network. The server usage just spiked to 100%. Someone initiated a system maintenance protocol. What does that mean? It means Beatrix is wiping the drives, Kaito yelled. She's deleting the server logs. If she finishes, the proof of the IP spoof is gone. You'll be framed forever. I ran. I burst out of the bank and flagged a taxi, screaming at the driver to get me to the Pierce Tower. When I arrived, the lobby was empty. I used an old maintenance key, one they had forgotten to deactivate, to get into the stairwell. I ran up 6 flights to the server room floor. I burst through the doors. The air was humming with the sound of cooling fans spinning at maximum velocity. I ran to the main console. The screen was a wall of red text. Deleting Sector 4. Complete. Deleting Sector 5. Complete. Purging logs. No. I slammed my fingers onto the keyboard, trying to cancel the command. Access denied. Admin privileges required. I watched, helpless, as the progress bar hit 100%. Deletion complete. System rebooting. The screen went black. The logs were gone. The proof that Beatrix had used her iPad to frame me was gone. I stood there in the blinking blue light of the server room, panting, sweat dripping down my back. They had won. Without those logs, I was just an old man with a crazy story about a diary and a secret daughter. They would bury me. My phone rang. It was Kaito. Did you stop it? No, I rasped. It's gone, everything. She wiped it. There was a long silence on the line. Then we're dead, Kaito said. Wait, I said. My eyes scanned the room, the sleek, modern server racks, the cloud uplinks. And then my memory flashed back to 1999, the Y2K scare. Kaito, I said, my voice rising. The system, the core architecture. It was built on the old legacy mainframe from the 90s. So? So, I said. The old system had a hardwired redundancy, a tape backup. Every night at midnight, it writes a physical magnetic tape of the day's transaction logs. It's a failsafe against EMPs or total cloud failure. Does it still work? I never turned it off, I said. But the tape drives aren't here. They're in the bunker. The bunker? The West Side Depot, I said. The old storage facility. That's where the physical archives are. I checked my watch. It was 11 p.m. The board meeting was at 8 a.m. The tape from yesterday, I calculated. It would have recorded the spoofed signal before the wipe. It's sitting on a reel in a warehouse 10 miles from here. Beatrix knows about the depot, Kaito warned. She tried to sell it last month. Then I have to get there before she remembers it exists, I said. Meet me there. Bring the playback equipment. My company car was gone, repossessed by Reed that morning. I took a taxi to my townhouse. In the garage, under a dusty tarp, sat the one thing they hadn't taken because they didn't know it ran: my 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback. The car I had restored with my own hands. I turned the key. The V8 engine roared to life, a guttural, angry sound that matched the beating of my heart. I tore out of the garage, tires screeching. I hit the expressway, weaving through the late-night traffic. I wasn't a CEO anymore. I was a truck driver. I knew these roads better than the blood in my veins. I pushed the Mustang to 80, 90 miles an hour. The city blurred past. I was racing not just for the money, but for Catherine, for the truth, for the son who didn't know who he was. The West Side Depot was a crumbling brick monolith from the industrial age. It was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. I skidded to a halt at the gate. It was locked, and there was a car there, a black SUV. Beatrix. She had remembered. I slammed the Mustang into gear and drove through the gate. The chain link snapped with a screech of tearing metal. I drove straight up to the loading dock. Two men in security uniforms, private contractors, not my employees, stepped out of the SUV. They had hands on their holsters. "Private property," one yelled. "Get out of the vehicle." I stepped out. I held the tire iron I had grabbed from the trunk. I must have looked like a maniac. A 65-year-old man in a suit, holding a metal bar, eyes wild. "I am Julian Pierce," I roared. "I own this property. Step aside." "We have orders from the COO to secure the site," the guard said, unholstering a taser. "No access." "Reed is a boy," I shouted, stepping forward. "I built this. Move!" The guard raised the taser. Suddenly, headlights flooded the yard. Kaito's Lexus screeched in, flanked by another car, a police cruiser. Kaito stepped out, waving a paper. "Officer, these men are trespassing on private property. Here is the deed." The guards hesitated. They looked at the cop, then at me. They were hired muscle, not loyalists. They lowered their weapons. "We're just doing our job," the guard muttered. "Your job is done," I spat. I ran past them into the warehouse. I sprinted to the archive cage in the back. I smashed the padlock with the tire iron. Inside, the air smelled of dust and magnetic tape. Banks of old reel-to-reel machines hummed in the dark. I scanned the labels. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. There it was. The reel labeled Daily Log Archive Current. I grabbed it. It was heavy. It felt like victory. 4 a.m., the boardroom. The mood was funeral. The board members, 6 men and women who had known me for years, sat in uncomfortable silence. Beatrix and Reed were at the head of the table. Beatrix looked radiant. She had won. The servers were wiped. I had no evidence. "Shall we begin?" Beatrix said, opening a folder. "We are here to discuss the immediate transition of leadership due to incapacity." She looked at the empty chair where I usually sat. "Julian has declined to attend," she said with fake sadness. "I think his absence speaks volumes about his mental state." "Does it?" I asked. I walked into the room. I was wearing the same suit from yesterday. I hadn't shaved. I looked rough, dangerous. Beatrix froze. "Security," she hissed. "Why was he let in?" "Because my name is on the building, Beatrix," I said, walking to the head of the table. Kaito followed me in, carrying a heavy, archaic-looking reel-to-reel player and a laptop. "This is highly irregular," a board member muttered. "Sit down, George," I said. "You're going to want to see this." "This is a waste of time," Beatrix stood up. We have a vote scheduled. Julian is trying to stall because he embezzled nearly $1 million. The room gasped. She had played her card. He set up a shell company, Beatrix shouted, pointing at me. B&R Strategics. He stole from the company to fund his retirement. We have the digital signatures. Show them, I said calmly. Beatrix projected the slide. The invoices with my digital signature. There, proof. Now, I said to Kaito, play the tape. Kaito connected the old machine to the room's AV system. The screen flickered, then showed raw code scrolling in green text. What is this? Reed asked, his voice trembling. This is the backup tape from the legacy server, I said. The one you forgot to wipe, Beatrix. It records the truth, not the lies you planted. Kaito paused the scroll. Here, Kaito pointed. Timestamp, 14 is ours. Command, approve invoice. Origin IP, spoofed. Real MAC address, Apple device, Queen Bee. The silence was absolute. Every eye turned to Beatrix. Queen Bee, I said. Your iPad, Beatrix. That's manipulated, she stammered, her face draining of color. And here, Kaito continued, the outgoing wire transfers to the Aspen Title Company for a property in the name of Beatrix Pierce. He clicked again. And to the Porsche dealership. I turned to the board. She stole the money, she used her own device, and then she spoofed my signature to frame me. And last night she wiped the main servers to hide it, but she forgot the tapes. Reed was staring at the screen. Aspen, he whispered. You bought the house? You told me the deal fell through. Shut up, Reed, Beatrix hissed. She played you, son, I said, looking at him with pity. She played all of us. This is a lie, Beatrix screamed. He's senile, he's crazy. Motion to dismiss Beatrix Pierce, I said, looking at the board. For gross misconduct, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. Seconded, George said immediately, his face purple with rage. All in favor? Every hand went up. Motion passes, I said. You're fired, Beatrix. Get out. Security, my security, stepped forward. You can't do this, Beatrix shrieked as they grabbed her arms. I own half this stock. I'm the wife of the heir. You can't touch me. She was dragged out, kicking and screaming, her dignity shedding like dead skin. Reed sat there, weeping. Dad, I didn't know. I swear. You should have known, I said quietly. You're the COO. Ignorance isn't a defense, it's a resignation. Reed put his head in his hands. We were done. The cancer was cut out. But the surgery wasn't over. A week later, the dust had settled. The criminal charges were filed. Beatrix was out on bail, facing 10 years for fraud. But she wasn't done. She requested a meeting. A settlement conference. She walked into Kaito's office with Reed trailing behind her. She looked haggard, but her eyes were still defiant. Okay, Julian, she said, sitting down. You won the battle, but you haven't won the war. We're filing for divorce, of course. But Reed still owns his shares. And as his wife, I'm entitled to half of his assets. That includes his future inheritance. The 51%. She leaned forward. So here's the deal. You drop the criminal charges, or we tie this company up in probate court for the next 20 years. We will freeze the assets. We will bleed you dry. Reed looked at me, pleading. Dad, just let us go. Please. I looked at them. They still thought they had leverage. There is no inheritance, Reed, I said softly. What? Beatrix snapped. He's your son. He's Catherine's son. He gets the controlling stake. It's in the bylaws. Kaito, I said, read the will. Kaito opened the blue folder. Article 14, he read. The Bloodline Clause. The controlling interest passes only to a biological heir of Catherine Pierce. Beatrix laughed, a brittle, cracking sound. So? Reed is her son? What is this, a biology lesson? He came out of her body? I've seen the birth certificate. You've seen the adoption papers, I corrected. Beatrix stopped laughing. What? I didn't know either, I said, until I opened the box. I slid the old, yellowed birth certificate across the table. Mother, Sarah Jenkins. Reed stared at it. He picked it up, his hands trembling so hard the paper rattled against the glass table. Mom, he whispered. Mom isn't... She wasn't... She adopted you, Reed, I said. She loved you more than life itself. But she knew you were weak. And she knew you. I looked at Beatrix. She knew you would try to take the company. So she wrote the clause. This is fake, Beatrix hissed. You forged this. We anticipated you would say that, Kaito said. Which is why we executed the DNA test Catherine ordered before she died. She submitted her sample, and she pulled a sample from Reed's medical file. Kaito placed the lab report on the table. Probability of maternity, 0.00%. Reed is not a biological heir, Kaito said. Therefore, under the terms of the trust, he inherits nothing. No stock, no voting rights, nothing. Beatrix stared at the paper. The math was crashing down on her. 0 times 51% was 0. Then who? She whispered. If not him, who gets it? You? You can't inherit it either. You're the husband, not the bloodline. No, I said. I don't get it. The door to the conference room opened. A woman walked in. She was tall, with dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. She wore a simple green coat and carried herself with a quiet dignity that filled the room. Reed looked up. He gasped. She looked exactly like Catherine did at 40. Beatrix, Reed, I said, standing up. I'd like you to meet Dr. Audrey Winslow. Audrey stepped forward. She didn't smile. She looked at Beatrix with clinical detachment. Who is she? Beatrix demanded, her voice rising to a shriek. She is the chief of thoracic surgery at Penn Medicine, Kaito said. And she is Catherine Pierce's biological daughter, born in 1968, given up for adoption, reunited last year. She is the heir, I said. She owns the 51%. Beatrix looked at Audrey. She looked at the face that was undeniably Catherine's. The fight went out of her. It was like cutting the strings of a marionette. She slumped in her chair. No, she moaned. No, no, no. She had lost the money. She had lost the company. She had lost the leverage. Reed was staring at me. Dad, does that mean... You're my son, Reed, I said, my voice breaking. I made a mistake 40 years ago. I cheated. You were the result. Catherine, she saved us both. She took you in to hide my sin. She loved you to protect me. Reed started to sob. Ugly, racking sobs. He realized finally that the woman he had betrayed, the mother he had helped rob, was the only reason he had a life at all. And he had spat on her grave. Get out, Audrey said. Her voice was calm, but it had steel in it. Get out of my company. Beatrix stood up, swaying. She grabbed her purse. She didn't look at Reed. She walked out the door, into a future of courtrooms and bankruptcy. Reed lingered. He looked at me one last time. Dad. Go, Reed, I said. Go find a job. Go earn something for the first time in your life. He turned and left. I stood on the loading dock of the main distribution center. The sun was setting, turning the sky a bruised purple. Trucks were rolling out. Massive engines idling, the lifeblood of the company flowing again. Audrey stood next to me. She was a genius, Audrey said softly. My mother. She was, I said. She played us all. She knew I would need a reason to fight. She knew I would need you. I'm not staying, Julian, Audrey said. I have patients in Philly. I can't run a logistics company. I know, I said. But you'll be the chairwoman. You'll keep us honest. And you? She asked. I looked at the trucks. I looked at the empire I had built and almost lost. I'm going to run it, I said, for a little while longer, until I fix the damage, until it's worthy of her name again. I took the iron key out of my pocket. I held it up to the dying light. Thank you, Catherine, I whispered. The wind blew across the concrete, cold and fresh. It felt like forgiveness. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.